Hi guys, welcome back to another video. It is May 1st that I'm recording this. Why is it May 1st already? But let's not talk about that. But what I am going to talk about is the books I read in April. So on paper, I read a ton of books last month. I think the most books I have ever read in just 1 month, because it was 14 pieces of work. But it doesn't even feel like I read that much, because you will be able to see that most of these books are actually kind of thin, or I read them super quickly, so it doesn't feel like, damn, I read 14 books this month. But anyway, we will get into all of it. Let's get started. Get yourself something hot and cozy to drink. Maybe put this on in the background while you're doodling, setting up your bullet journals for May or whatever, or you're painting. I don't know. I hope you're having a cozy time while you're watching this. Let's get started. Okay, the book I started everything off with this month was Gaston Leroux's I don't know how you say that. The Phantom of the Opera. Now, I actually read this book because Emmy, another booktuber channel here on YouTube, recommended this a ton because it is one of her favorite books of all time. I made an entire video about it, so if you want to hear like my in-depth thoughts on the book, you can check out this other video. But basically, this is a very easy to read, very approachable classic. I don't know if you know this other video of mine where I talked about some classic recommendations for beginners. Back then I hadn't read this yet, but if I would film this video now, I would definitely include this. This is a very good place to start if you're looking to get into classical literature. This was a lot of fun. It's also quite a quick read. This is a mix of things, I would say. It is part mystery, murder mystery. It also involves a love story. We are basically trying to uncover the story, the character of who is the Phantom of the Opera, who is a man called Eric, who lives underneath the opera in Paris, and he has a very interesting backstory. The things he does at the opera: he abducts this young girl and she's in love with this guy Raoul, and then he goes looking for her. We learn more about the Phantom and why he does what he does and who he is and all of that. I don't know, I had a good time reading this. There were just like some moments where I felt like the book dragged on a little bit, or there were just like a few instances that I couldn't really logically explain, so they felt kind of weird to me. But this is 100% set in our real life world. It is not about an actual ghost or something like that. So overall, I really had a good time with this. So once again, thank you, Amy, for the recommendation. If you're looking for an easy to read classic, you could start with this one if you like to. Moving on, I'm going to talk about 7 books at the same time because they are all part of a series. I read the first 6, or like to be precise, 6.25. I didn't finish the 7th part of the Gossip Girl series. I also made a separate video about this. This was kind of like out of the spur of the moment. I woke up one day and I had to think about the Gossip Girl books because I read them a ton, and my sister too, when we were still younger. And I don't know, I mean, it must have been connected to the dream I had that night. I don't remember what it was about, but I woke up and I had to think about these books and was like, you know what, let's grab the first book and read a couple of pages. I hadn't even necessarily planned on actually reading the first book that day, but then I did, and I didn't stop there, but then I continued and read the first 6.5, kind of like I didn't finish the 7th part, even though at least I think I remember that the 7th part was one of my favorite part in the series. But by the time I was halfway, like a quarter into it, or like halfway through, I had just like satiated my craving for Gossip Girl, so I stopped. And also I had like a ton of other books I wanted to read, so I left it off there. Now this, obviously, if you couldn't tell by the name, is the book series that the very famous TV show of the early 2000s is based on. We follow a broadcast set in New York's Upper East Side scene. We follow Blair, Serena, Nate, Dan, Vanessa, Jenny, and a bunch of side characters as well, as they are navigating their last year in school and them applying to colleges. And then of course it's about who's into whom, who's dating whom, what parties are going on. It's all over the place, just like teenagers living their life, but all of these teenagers just so happen to be super freaking rich and super privileged and all of that. The books are actually really, really hilarious. The TV series is definitely more on the drama side, but the books are a really good and funny time, very comedical, almost satirical at times. So yeah, I obviously had a good time revising this chapter of my childhood, had a good time reading some of these books again. There's some honestly hilarious like scenes, phrases, whatever in here, and I had a really good time. So I read 6.5 of these books. Moving on, I read a book that I had already heard a lot about, but I don't know, it took me until now to finally pick it up myself, and that is Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. Oh, I don't know what happened to my copy here. It's all damaged. This is a novella. As you can see, it's like really short. That's why I almost don't want to count it as a full-on book, because like you will see some of the other books are also pretty thin. So that's why it didn't feel like I read 14 books, because some of them were like really thin. But anyway, this is maybe more like a novella. I completely forgot what the actual definition of a novella is. I definitely knew that at some point. I don't anymore, but like it's more of a novella, short story kind of situation. You can read this realistically probably like within an hour. I read it over the span of one day because I was doing other stuff on that in that day as well. But yeah, this follows a couple of days or weeks in the life of a 30-year-old convenience store woman worker. And I think the like medical term is neurodivergent, that like she's a neurodivergent character, which I didn't do my research, and I probably should have, because you have to be really careful how you phrase things and say things on the internet. But I think neurodivergent means that she's like somewhere on the spectrum of being autistic. She has trouble kind of like navigating her everyday life. She doesn't experience life like most people do, considering like emotions and all of that. So she's often like copying other people's, like the way they talk, the way they intonate, the way they express feelings and emotions that she actually doesn't feel, but she knows that in order to be like accepted in society, she if other people are like angry about something, she also has to express anger about it to like belong to the group, to be accepted in a certain group, for example. So working in this convenience store, she feels really, it feels like a safe space for her, because there's like a set manual of how she has to deal with all kinds of situations, how she is supposed to interact with customers, what she's supposed to do, what she's supposed to say, and all of that. And that really helps her in her like special situation, navigating her everyday life. But then again, there are of course her like friends at the convenience store, but also her friends outside of it, and her siblings and all of that, that really give her a hard time for being 38 years old and still only working at a convenience store, because working at a convenience store or something like that is by most people considered to be like a student's job that you maybe do while you're still in college, which is also how she started working there. But then at some time you drop out of it again and you start your big boy job, or like what you actually want to do with your life, whatever. And she has been working at this convenience store for 18 years and people are giving her all kinds of crap. So I don't know where it happens, like halfway through the book or something, she does a thing to kind of like adapt to the situation a bit more and to make other people in her life happy, or like at least make them shut up about it. But in the end, I don't know, I wouldn't really consider this a spoiler. Maybe if you don't want to hear what happens in the end, skip ahead a few seconds. But because it is such a short read, I don't know, it doesn't feel like that big of a spoiler, I don't know. But in the end, she comes like full circle basically and realizes that it doesn't work out, it doesn't make sense doing things and changing how she lives her life only to make other people happy, when she knows what she wants to do, what she is meant to do, how she feels comfortable living her life and happy to a certain extent, at least how she's able to feel that emotion, is to work as a convenience store woman. And that is perfect and that is fine. And yeah, she comes to this realization, and so she goes back to working at a convenience store. I don't know, I really enjoyed this short story, novella, whatever you want to call it. Of course, this is actually talking about a very specific case of this, again, I think the term is neurodivergent, a person trying to grapple with their life. But the overall story can of course be applicable to anyone. If you find something that truly makes you happy, you find the thing that you want to do with your life, don't have other people dissuade you from doing it because they don't consider it a proper thing to do for you or something like that. I don't know, that's like the underlying message that is applicable to anyone, and I really like that. So there you go, Convenience Store Woman. I had a really good time with this. Okay, next up I read a book of a similar format maybe, or you can already see it in the screen, and that is Winter in Sokcho. Another, it's a bit thicker than Convenience Store Woman, but not by a lot. So another short story, novella, or book, whatever. I like how the cover is horizontal. Me thinking about if it's horizontal or vertical, because you don't see that a lot, and it's like in the style of a postcard. I don't know. This tells the story of a girl working in Sokcho at a kind of like a bed and breakfast situation, or like hotel guest house, and a French guy comes along to stay there for a couple of weeks actually, and it's kind of like about them developing a relationship, though I did think that was kind of weird because they don't really get along, or like the conversations we witness them having and the times we witness them spending together, she's kind of like showing him the city because he asks her to. It always feels kind of like awkward, and as I just said, it doesn't really feel like they're getting along, but then it does develop into like a bit like a hint of a love story, in the sense that she's like kind of crushed when he leaves again in the end. I don't know. I think maybe I didn't really grab what this book is supposed to tell me. I don't think I grabbed the hidden meaning of this book, if there is one, but maybe there also just isn't one. I mean, I enjoyed it alright because it was also like a really quick and easy read, but I didn't find it like impacting me all that much. And yet, like, you know, with this, I understood what like the underlying message is supposed to be, and how it's like really nice and beautiful, you know. But with this, I don't really know. I didn't get it, if there is one, but maybe, as I just said, maybe there also isn't like a bigger, deeper message we are supposed to be thinking about that is conveyed through the story of this book. It is just about like her everyday life, although yeah, we also learn a bit about her relationship with her mother that is pretty complicated. She also seems to have some eating disorders. Her relationship with her boyfriend, whom she breaks up with at some point in the story, is also really messed up. She doesn't really seem to care all that much about him. She seems to be pretty indifferent about most things in her life anyway, but indifferent in the sense that she feels very stuck in Sokcho because she feels like she has to stay there because of her mother to like take care of her, but she doesn't really like the life she's leading there. And then this guest comes, and maybe that's like the point of the story, that like with this guest coming, even though like maybe personally it's not like they crazy fall in love or anything like that, but because there's this outsider, and like literal outsider because he's from France, like a tourist, not just like a stranger from anywhere else in Korea, maybe she imagines a life with him, what a life outside of like her confines of Sokcho could look like. But then of course it's just like a daydream, because at some point he leaves again and she has to stay. Maybe that's like the deeper meaning of it all. I don't know. It was okay. I enjoyed reading it. I don't know, but it didn't leave me with like a profound sense of understanding a very deep story or something like that. But I had a good time with it nonetheless. Also, this was the group project pick of Monica and Chloe's readathon that happened in March. Now, I read this in April, so obviously I did not make it in time to participate in their readathon challenge in March, but I thought I would just mention it here anyway. Okay, the next book I read, it's not a book per se, it's a play, and that is The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. Now, I picked this up because I recently read or like tried to solve Cain's Jawbone. I have an entire video about it, an hour-long video about it, if you care to join me on that journey. And in Cain's Jawbone, there are a ton of quotes from Oscar Wilde, The Importance of Being Earnest, including like my top favorite quotes of the entire book. They were all by Oscar Wilde. And to be really honest, I hadn't read this before. I only quite recently actually read my first Oscar Wilde. That was in my last semester of uni, in like the last winter semester. I read The Picture of Dorian Gray and I really enjoyed it, and now I picked up this, and by God, it's hilarious. I really love Oscar Wilde. I mean, now I have only read 2 of his works, but I really think I vibe with the dude, if you know what I'm saying. This is so hilarious. It really gave me P.G. Wodehouse, Jeeves and Wooster, or Blondin's vibes, if you have any idea what I'm talking about with that one. It's quite an absurd and hilarious play about people trying to change their name to Earnest. This is not about being truthful, it's about being named Earnest, really. It's Oscar Wilde, I love him. It is really funny. It's a lot about miscommunication and all of that, but in the most hilarious sense. I really want to, do I actually? But maybe I want to watch like a live production of this, or like a recording of a live production. I really need to get into more of Oscar Wilde's works, because the two things I have read of his, I absolutely adored, so can't wait to read more, honestly. Okay. The next book I read this month was yet another reread. I actually meant to say this at the beginning of the video, but April for me was all about short books, as you already saw, and rereading books, because 8 of the books I read this month are actually rereads. All the Gossip Girl books, of course, the book I will be talking about in just a few seconds, and then another book I will be talking about at the end of the video. And I read 5 new books. I actually reread more books than I read new books this month. So yeah, those were like the 2 underlying themes of my reading month of April. So yeah, this is another book I had already read about before, Death Set Sail. I read this while I was on a Nile cruise myself. I did go to Egypt in April, which such a crazy thing to say. I have like a travel vlog up if you care to hear a bit more about that. Crazy to think I was in Egypt, the fuck. And I read this because I wanted to read a book in Egypt that felt very fitting with the setting I was in, and I did not want to reread Agatha Christie's Death on the Nile, because if you're not aware, in February, was it, Kenneth Branagh's production of Death on the Nile was dropped, and I actually watched it twice. So, and of course, I have also already read Death on the Nile, the book by Agatha Christie. So the plot was just like newly refreshed in my head, so I didn't feel like rereading it like yet again. So I chose to reread this book instead, because this also takes place on a Nile cruise. Now, this is a murder mystery. It is the 9th and last part in the Murder Most Unladylike series by Robin Stevens, a series I recommended in, my gosh, I'm referencing all these other videos of mine in this video. I recommended this entire series in this book, in which I talk about YA murder mystery series. It is by far my favorite one for sure. I really like the entire series. It's about 2 young girls, Hazel Wong and Daisy Wells, going to boarding school in England, and they're the founders of the Detective Society, and it's about them, well, solving murder mysteries. Some of them take place at the boarding school, but then we also often accompany them in their vacation. So this is also why this is set in Egypt, because they're visiting someone on vacation, so that's why they're there. Another book is taking place in Cambridge, another one in Hong Kong, another one in London, another one on the Orient Express. So we have a lot of different settings over all of these books, but this is taking place in Egypt, more specifically in Nile Cruise, and very similar to the setting of Agatha Christie's Death on the Nile. It's about a murder happening on the ship, and they have to solve the murder before, well, they land on land again. My gosh, I do not know any nautical terms whatsoever. I apparently don't even know what you call it when a ship docks in at land again. Anyway, so to me, this is like the perfect Nile cruise read if you do not want to read Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. Now, the third to last book I read this month was actually my first ever Murakami. I read Murakami's After Dark over the last couple of days. Again, quite a short book, about the size of my hand. Okay, it's a bit bigger, but my hands are tiny, so that doesn't mean anything. Now, I had, of course, heard a lot about Murakami before. A lot of people really like him or really celebrate a couple of his works. I, so far, had not really felt inclined to picking his work up myself, because most of the things I had heard about him left me feeling quite ambivalent, as in like, sure, a lot of the stories, or like the gist of the stories that I had, sounded quite like interesting and intriguing, but also pretty fucking weird. Plus, there's this entire dilemma of the portrayal of women in Murakami's work that is apparently quite controversial, and I never felt like, oh yeah, let me get into all of that. So that's why up until now I never picked up a Murakami work, I'm gonna be honest. But now I picked up After Dark after, I think, Leonie from the book Leo recommended it. This story takes place over the span of just one night in Tokyo. We follow especially one girl called Mari, and how she's spending the night hours in Tokyo and what's happening to her, the people she meets, the situations she's involved in, the very deep conversations she has with people who are basically strangers, but yet they manage to make this very special connection, talk about some really deep topics that maybe she wouldn't talk about with people she's actually close in her life during the daytime, but things change during the night. So it's all about that. There's an aspect of the story that is more surrounding her sister that gets a bit weird. Supernatural is the wrong term, but out of this world stuff is happening to her sister apparently that I couldn't really wrap my head around. Like that part of the story, but to what's like happening to her sister while she's sleeping, that I wasn't so sure about. What that was even like supposed to tell me basically. I prefer my books in general to take place in our real life world and to have things happen in them that could happen in our real life world, no like supernatural or whatever stuff. So there was like a tiny part of the story that felt like a bit off to me because it was more like, what is going on there? But most of the time we're spending this book with Marie. So what's happening to her sister, I at some point I just not really ignored it, but I can't really talk about it a lot right here because if it was supposed to tell me anything special or meaningful or very deep, then I didn't grasp it because I wasn't sure what the entire Eri Asai part of the story was supposed to give me basically. But yeah, this book, I enjoyed it. I do like this concept of making an entire book about this special way a city changes, or like any place changes during the night, like the experience you have in a place during the daytime and during the nighttime being completely different, completely almost opposite to one another. I really appreciated that concept, so I had a good time with this book actually. Will I be picking up another Murakami work right away? Maybe not. I don't know what all of his other books are about, but I think Norwegian Wood is also about just mid-20 people, students living in Tokyo, navigating their life. So maybe I would be inclined to pick that up next. I heard really freaky things about Kafka on the Shore. I don't think I will be picking that up anytime soon. But yeah, maybe Norwegian Wood will be following at some point in the future. Who knows? Yet another book I am rereading right now, the by far biggest book of the entire bunch. V. Schwab's The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I read this once before, I think a bit over a year ago, and I enjoyed it well enough, but I didn't actually think about it all that much again. But quite recently I had to think about it again and I decided to reread it. As you can tell, I'm almost done with it and I'm having a really good time rereading it actually. I'm enjoying spending some more time with the characters, like going through the entire story again. So I will give you like a spoiler-free and then a spoiler-full talk about this book. So first, of course, the spoiler-free one. This book follows Addie LaRue. Addie, who makes a deal with the devil, basically, or he's called the darkness, a deal with the darkness, and her deal, her curse, whatever you want to call it, makes her immortal, but curses her in the way that people cannot remember her. You know the phrase, out of sight, out of mind? Yeah, that she's the personification of that phrase, because once a door closes between her and another person, she rounds the corners, this other person can't see her anymore, they forget her. She cannot leave a mark on the world, she cannot be remembered by anyone. And so basically this book is divided into two timelines. In the one part, we're in the present day, which is taking place in 2014 in New York. And then we have snippets of her life over the centuries and the things that she experiences, the things that happen to her, how she's living her life over these 300 plus years ever since she was cast, and the moments in history she witnesses, the struggles she goes through, but also the amazing things that happen to her. So we have flashbacks of certain points in the past, and we learn some more about how she lived her life up until now. And then in 2014 we have a very special situation happening, a very pivotal moment in her life, because an entire new situation is coming up, something she has not yet experienced in over 300 years. And I do not want to spoil it. Here's the biggest thing. By God, if you want to read this book and you do not want to be spoiled, do not, I repeat, do not read the back of the book before you read it, because in the first paragraph of the synopsis on the back of the book, an event is straight up being spoiled that only happens after like 200 pages of the actual book. So a friend of mine had read this before and she warned me, and so I didn't read it, and I read the book and then I read the back and was like, oh yeah, that would have been like a big spoiler. But she had already read the back of the book, and so while she was reading it, she kept getting impatient, like, when is this thing finally gonna happen that I already know is gonna happen because I read it on the back of the book. So be aware of that. There's like a big spoiler as to something that happens. Okay, now I do want to talk about the story some more, but it is going to contain full-on spoilers. So I'm going to put up like the cover of the book right here, and for the entirety that you see the cover of the book right here, I am going to talk spoilers. So you can just mute me, and once you see the cover disappearing, you know you can switch on the sound again. Okay, so basically, what happens after the first 200 books is that in the present day, in like 2014 in New York, for the first time in over 300 years, it happens that someone remembers her. A guy called Henry in New York remembers her, and of course she is shocked. She's flabbergasted because it has never happened to her. She's confused. She does not know what's going on, but obviously she savors the situation like no other, because this is what she has wanted for over 300 years, for someone to remember her. There's another big twist in the middle of the book, because like once they meet, she realizes that, fuck, he can remember her. Of course, they start to spend a lot of time with one another, but obviously she cannot keep the charade, so to say, up, because he, of course, realizes that something isn't right, because he keeps introducing her to his friends and stuff like that, and they keep forgetting her. And that's weird, of course. So at one point, around the halfway point through the book, she has to explain to him what's up. Why can't his friends, why can't anyone except for him remember her? So she does this big confession. She tells him, dude, I'm actually over 300 years old and I'm immortal and I'm cursed and no one can actually remember me, but you can, so that's dope for me. And of course, in that moment, we're like, okay, shit, what's gonna happen? Is he gonna believe her? Will he think she's making fun of him? He breaks out laughing maniacally, and we're like, okay, whoa, what's going on? And then he says, girl, I believe you. And you wanna know why? Well, it's because I made a deal with the darkness myself. Boom! Big shocker, big what the fuck moment. So that happens at the halfway point of this book. After that, we kind of learn about his curse, the deal he has made. Basically, the deal he has made is that he appears perfect to everyone. Everyone that looks at him sees what they want to see. So he can do no wrong. Everybody thinks that he's amazing, perfect, awesome, etc. He always felt like he was lacking. He was like the loser, a disappointment. And so at one night when he was like just denied to get married to his girlfriend, like he proposed to her and she said no, he had this like low point of his life. And that's when he made this deal with the darkness himself. And that's the deal he made, basically. That he, from now on, would be enough to and for everybody. Now, whenever people look at him, they don't really see him anymore, but they see what they want to see, like the perfect version of what they want to see, basically. I don't know, it's harder to explain than her curse, I believe. And basically, their two curses, so to say, they don't equal out, but it's like, because the thing that is perfect to her, the thing that she truly wants, is for someone to remember her, and so that's why he can remember her. And but that's the only thing she wants from like another person. So she's like the first person in a really long time, ever since he has made the curse, who sees him as he is and not as what they want to see, basically. So both are really happy with this situation. Finally, someone remembers her, and he's finally found a person who sees him for himself and likes him for himself. Now, here's already a point where I was like, it is really convenient, of course, that they actually like each other, because imagine he were like this complete asshole, but he's the only person that remembers her. Of course, she's forced to stick around with him, but if they didn't like each other, this would not be such smooth sailing. But they do get along, of course. They do fall in love and start like a relationship, but I mean, this is a world where we are making deals with the devil, deals with the darkness. People are being cursed. Obviously, happy ever after is not in the cards for them. And this is kind of like the point where I'm at right now. And I don't have like full recollection of what will be happening in like these last few pages of the book. I do remember, obviously, the darkness, he will chime in. He will not just let them be happy. So I remember in the very end that she kind of like sacrifices herself so that Henry can, first of all, continue living, because I think the darkness almost like kills him or something, and he is free of his curse, but he can keep on living. He doesn't have to give the darkness his soul, because that's actually what the deal is like. But I know she tricks the darkness in like this ingenious way. For some time of her existence, especially of her early existence, she always blamed the darkness, like, oh my god, why did you do this to me? Why did you curse me? When really, of course, it was her fault. It was just like her poor phrasing, because like in that moment, in like 1600, I think 91 or something like that, when she made the deal, she was like in a really desperate situation. So she just says something like, I just want more time. And of course the darkness, because it's the fucking darkness, it's not going to do you any good, basically. Of course he took those very vague words of her and like twisted her in the way that they turn out, basically. So she is immortal now, but also like because she was like, I want to live freely, untethered from anybody. So he was like, okay girl, you can have it. No one's gonna remember you. You couldn't possibly be more free than that. So, but for some time, she's like always blaming him that like he did this to her, when really it was just like her. If she had phrased her actual wishes properly and like really specifically, none of this would have happened, you know? So anyway, that was like a part. I mean, I remember when I read this book for the first time, it was a part that bothered me more, or like it annoyed me, that she was always like, oh, the darkness is so evil, he did this to me, when she literally did it to herself. Like, don't blame like the devil for doing something that is like basically your fault. Like, you wanted this. Now make your bed and lie in it, you know? But like my second time reading this, I didn't catch up on so many instances where she was complaining about the situation. I feel like over the time, of course, she has also learned to live with her situation, and she has also accepted that maybe it was a bit her fault. I don't know, or maybe the entire annoying part is only yet to come in this last part of the book. I'm not sure anymore. But what I also remember is that we learned that at some point she and the darkness, by the way, of course, like this darkness is actually this godly thing, this godly entity, but it presents itself to her, of course, in the shape of a very hot human being. So the darkness is actually looking pretty hot. And I remember in like this last part of the story, we learn that they actually had a thing once. Like she and the darkness, after like centuries of living alongside of each other, most of the time, like she hates him, of course, because she's like, oh, you're the bad one. But because he's like, the darkness is the only person who knows who she is and stuff, and remembers her and can say her name and everything. Of course, she over the time grows attached to him, because he's the only other thing that knows her. Basically, every person, every human on the planet keeps forgetting her. So at one point, I don't know, there's not a little something. And I remember, at least the first time I read this book, I rooted for that situation. When we learn about this thing, I was like, okay, yeah, isn't this a cool ending, actually? Like, them just being this boss-ass, bitch, badass couple, both like immortal, both can do whatever they want to. And like, he's, of course, because he's a god, he's like this entity, he's like omnipotent. He can make all the hardships basically of her life disappear, because obviously it's really hard for her to live on a day-to-day basis, because she can't work a normal job, earn money or anything, so she has to steal and hide and all of that. So she's not having an easy life. So of course, when she's working in alliance with the darkness, of course, things are so much easier. Plus, he's like the super hot dude. I mean, come on. So apparently they were together at some point, but then for some reason, and I think this was also maybe one of the parts that kind of like annoyed me, she's all like, oh no, you're too possessive, I don't want this anymore. And so she breaks up or whatever, and then she falls in love with like Henry, like this human guy, and she wants him over anything else. I don't know. I just remember that when I first read this book, I was like, wasn't this like your alliance with the darkness? That was pretty much an ideal situation for the situation you're in, being immortal and never having anybody remember her. Like, what else do you want, kind of? So yeah, I remember that I was actually rooting for them, and I was annoyed for her for some reason, like breaking everything off, because yeah, I think she just got like all annoyed again, like, oh no, you did this to me, you're the bad one, I don't know. And so that's why she walked away. But I mean, I have yet to cover this part of the book again, so maybe when I read it this time, I'm gonna feel differently about it. If I still finish this in time before I upload this video, I am gonna attach like a brief commentary on how I felt about the last part of the book before I end the video. But yeah, that is Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I'm actually having a really good time rereading it. Okay. Hi guys, okay, so I'm coming on real quick before I have to head out. Actually, I should already be on my way to the library, but okay. Last night I finished reading The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. And basically, I think about the book the same way I did a year ago. I still think it would have made way more sense. I would have enjoyed the storyline more if Luke, the Darkness, and Addie would have, well, ended up together in the sense that they're just doing their thing together, because I think it would have made more sense, so to say. I mean, it is proven over and over again that they do love each other. Obviously, it's a twisted and complicated kind of love, but they do belong to one another. And it's not just him being possessive of her. She also owns him, so to say. He also belongs to her just as much as she belongs to him, because they both don't and can't have anything in anyone else. I don't know. So I would have enjoyed that more. I think Luke, in the end, he deserves better, because she twists the deal in the way that for Henry to be set free, like, he doesn't have to make the deal anymore, he doesn't have to give up his soul so he can continue living. She promises the Darkness to go with him and to be with him for as long as he wants her. And that's, of course, that's not the same thing as forever at all, because basically now it is her plan to torment him and be awful to him for like the rest of her life, to punish him. But honestly, my question is, punish him for what? I don't think that Luke is per se the bad guy in this scenario. I mean, he is the Darkness, he is the devil, whatever. So like, what do you expect him to do? That's just what and who he is. Don't blame him for every bad thing that ever happened, being like, oh yeah, he's the bad one, when I don't think he is. He just is what he is, and he is the devil, and she knew that from the first second. And still, over these 300 years, I felt like she kept forgetting that he is the devil, and she kept wanting him to act a different kind of way and to do whatever she wants to. But it's like, bitch, it doesn't work that way. He is the devil. That's what he does, like, literally. What do you want? I don't know. So I actually think that she is being unreasonable in that sense, and I did get annoyed in the end about all the temper tantrums she keeps throwing, being like, oh no, you're the bad guy, you did this to me, when I don't think you can really squeeze him into that role. It's not like him actively doing it. I don't know, he just is what he is, and he is the Darkness, he is the devil. What do you expect him to do? What do you want him to do? I don't know. I would have been fine with everything with the book, also like it playing out the way it does. I mean, especially with their kind of complicated relationship, of course it makes sense that over the span of 300 years they also are like not together at some point, and then she has her thing going on with Henry, and because she wants to save him. I mean, all of that makes sense basically. But I would have I think preferred the ending to be like, okay, she saved Henry, but like she also moved on, because she cannot be with him until the rest of her life, because she doesn't age. She's 23-year-old and he would keep aging. It would stop making sense at some point, I think. And she just realizes that it's the Darkness, it's Luke, that really can be her companion for life, because they're the only two immortal beings here, you know. I think I would have just preferred an ending like that. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense that she's in the end like, okay, now I'm gonna torture and torment him until the end of time. It's like, why? What did he do? He was just doing his job, making deals with people about their souls, and then claiming the souls when the deal has been completed. How can you blame him for that? I don't know, that's just my reading understanding of the book. I still enjoy the overall book. I mean, otherwise I wouldn't have reread it right now, right? And I would also still keep on rereading it, because apart from like that aspect, I do really enjoy the story. I do like the book. I can totally understand if you do not feel the same way about the story as me. I mean, I remember back then, like a year ago, I talked about this with my friend as well, my friend who has also read the book, obviously, and she didn't see the situation like that. So some of y'all were probably not either, but some of you maybe will. So that was, I mean, I definitely talked about Addie LaRue for the longest time in this video, so I hope you were actually interested in it. But yeah, with that, back to the video. Okay. Last but not least, the last book I read, it's not really a book, it's a comic, is Asterix and Cleopatra. I read this because, as I mentioned, I was in Egypt this month. Now, the Asterix and Obelix comic series is quite iconic in Europe. It's actually French, but it's very well known all over Europe, I would say, but I doubt it is known anywhere overseas, so maybe this is really not a thing anyone can relate to. Basically, my father grew up reading these, and then I grew up reading his copies of these. I got like a new and shiny copy of this a couple of years ago, and because we were in Egypt last month, I decided to reread this. It is a comic, it's funny. I'm not gonna get into it because this video is already super long. Okay, so basically these were all the books I read in April. Thank you so much for watching. Tell me what your favorite read of April was, and I'm gonna see you in the next video. Bye!